The rain came down in sheets the morning of my wife's funeral, like the sky itself was mourning alongside me. I stood there in my black suit, watching them lower Elizabeth's casket into the ground, and I couldn't feel a thing. Not because I didn't love her. God knows I love that woman with every broken piece of my soul, but because I was so numb from grief that my body had simply shut down. 43 years of marriage, and she was gone. Cancer took her slowly, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but a shell of the woman I'd promised to love until death do us part. I'm Robert Mitchell, 67 years old, and I've spent the last 30 years building a construction company from the ground up. Started with a single pickup truck and a dream, and now Mitchell Construction employs over 200 people across the state of Texas. We live in Austin, in a beautiful home overlooking Lake Travis that Elizabeth and I picked out together back when we were just starting out. It was supposed to be our retirement home, the place where we'd watch our grandchildren grow up and spend our golden years sipping sweet tea on the porch. But life had other plans. If you're new to Family Dark Blames, subscribe for more unforgettable family betrayal and revenge stories. Like this video, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Now, here's what really happened. My son Derek stood across from me at the gravesite, his arm wrapped protectively around his wife Amanda. He was 39 now, a successful real estate developer who'd made his own way in the world, or so I thought. He had my stubborn jaw and Elizabeth's kind eyes, but something had shifted in him over the past few months. Ever since Elizabeth got sick, he'd become distant, short-tempered, always checking his phone during our visits to the hospital. I chalked it up to stress. Losing a mother is hard on anyone, and Derek had always been closer to Elizabeth than he was to me. I was the stern father, the one who pushed him to work harder, to be better, to never settle for mediocrity. Elizabeth was the soft landing, the warm hug, the one who told him it was okay to fail as long as he got back up again. The pastor finished his final prayers, and the small gathering of family and friends began to disperse. Elizabeth's sister Margaret came up to me first, her eyes red and swollen. She hugged me tight and whispered that she'd call me later, that I shouldn't be alone tonight. I nodded and thanked her, watching as she walked away with her husband toward the parking lot. Then Derek approached me, and I could tell immediately that something was wrong. His jaw was set in that hard line I recognized from his teenage years, the one that meant he'd made up his mind about something and wasn't going to back down. "Dad, we need to talk," he said, his voice flat and businesslike. Amanda stood behind him, her arms crossed, looking anywhere but at me. "Can it wait, son?" I asked, my voice cracking slightly. "I'm not really in the right state of mind right now." "No, it can't wait." He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only I could hear. "I've been thinking about this for a while, and Mom's passing has made it clear that we need to make some changes. You're getting older, Dad. You can't keep living in that big house by yourself. It's too much for one person." I blinked at him, not understanding where this was going. "I'm not planning to live there alone forever, Derek. But I need some time to grieve, to figure things out. Your mother and I had plans. Those plans need to change." He cut me off, and I saw something flash in his eyes that I'd never seen before. Coldness. Calculation. "Amanda and I have been talking, and we think it's time you moved out. We need the house for the kids. The school district is better, and we want to be closer to the city for work." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "You want me to leave my own home? The house your mother and I built together? Dad, you can't afford to keep that place on your own. You're retired now, and Mom's medical bills." "My medical bills are paid," I said, my voice rising despite myself. "I have more than enough to cover them. Your mother and I planned for this, Derek. We had insurance. We had savings. I don't need you to take care of me." "Then sell the house and downsize," he said, as if he were discussing a business transaction. "Amanda and I are willing to take it off your hands. We'll give you a fair price, and you can find somewhere smaller, somewhere that doesn't have so many memories." The rain was starting to soak through my suit jacket, but I barely noticed. I stared at my son, this stranger who had taken over my little boy's body, and I felt something inside me shatter. "You want to buy my house?" I said slowly. "On the day we buried your mother?" "Derek, maybe this isn't the right time." Amanda finally spoke up, touching his arm. But he shook her off. "No, we've been dancing around this for months, and I'm tired of waiting. Dad, you're not getting any younger. You need to think about the future. Mom would have wanted us to be practical about this." I thought about my wife. lying in that casket just a few feet away, and I knew exactly what she would have wanted. She would have wanted our son to show some decency, some compassion, some respect for the woman who had brought him into this world. "I'm not selling," I said quietly. "I'm not leaving. And I'm certainly not having this conversation on the day we said goodbye to your mother." Then I walked away. I got in my car and drove home, barely seeing the road through the tears that finally started to fall. For the first time in my life, I felt truly alone. The next few weeks were a blur of grief and confusion. I spent most of my time in Elizabeth's garden, tending to the roses she'd planted years ago, talking to her like she could still hear me. Derek kept calling, kept pushing, kept trying to get me to agree to sell the house. He'd even had a real estate agent come by to do an appraisal, which I told him in no uncertain terms to cancel. But the worst part wasn't his pushiness. The worst part was the way he looked at me, like I was an inconvenience, a problem to be solved, like I was standing in the way of his plans. I found myself thinking about the past, about the years I'd spent working myself to the bone to provide for my family. The 12-hour days, the weekends spent at construction sites, the deals I'd closed, and the projects I'd completed. I'd done it all for them, for Elizabeth and Derek, to give them the life they deserved. And now Derek wanted to take it all away. One evening, about 2 months after the funeral, I was going through some old boxes in the attic, trying to sort through Elizabeth's things, when I came across a file I'd almost forgotten about. It was a thick manila folder with my name on it, filled with documents and legal papers. I opened it and started to read, and what I found sent a chill down my spine. It was a trust deed, a carefully constructed legal document that Elizabeth and I had drawn up when we first bought the house, back when Derek was just a toddler. We'd been young and optimistic then, convinced that we needed to protect our assets in case anything ever happened. Elizabeth had insisted on it, being the more pragmatic one, always thinking ahead. The trust deed stipulated that the house and all associated property would remain in my name solely, with Elizabeth as the primary beneficiary in case of my death. But there was a clause I'd forgotten about, one that Elizabeth had suggested herself. If anything happened to either of us, and if the surviving spouse faced any attempt to be removed from the property by a family member, that family member would immediately forfeit any claim to the estate, including Derek. I read the clause over and over, my heart pounding in my chest. Elizabeth had been a lawyer before she retired, and she'd known exactly what she was doing. She'd seen the way families could turn on each other when money was involved, and she'd wanted to protect me, to protect us. But that wasn't all I found in that folder. There were property deeds, financial statements, and something else I'd never expected to see. A document showing that the house wasn't just in my name. It was owned entirely by me and only me, with no joint tenancy rights for anyone else. Elizabeth had arranged it that way specifically to prevent exactly the kind of situation that was now unfolding. My own wife had prepared for our son's betrayal before he was even old enough to understand what betrayal meant. I sat there in the dusty attic, surrounded by memories, and I started to laugh. It was a hollow, bitter sound, nothing like the warm laughter I'd shared with Elizabeth all those years. But I couldn't help it. The irony was too perfect. My son thought he could push me out of my own home. He thought I was weak and alone and vulnerable. He had no idea that I owned every single thing he was trying to take from me. The house, the land, the trust funds I'd set up for his future. Everything. Even his own inheritance was tied up in a way that gave me complete control. I closed the folder and took it downstairs with me, feeling a sense of calm settle over my fractured heart. For the first time since Elizabeth died, I had a purpose. I had a plan. The next morning, I called my lawyer, a sharp-witted woman named Valerie Thompson who had been handling my affairs for over 20 years. I explained the situation to her, and I could practically hear her smile through the phone. "Robert, what do you want to do?" she asked. "First, I want to know everything," I said. "I want to know exactly what I own, exactly what I control, and exactly what Derek is entitled to. Then I want to start planning my next move." "Consider it done," she said. "I'll have everything ready by the end of the week." Meanwhile, I started paying closer attention to Derek and Amanda. I invited them to dinner, pretending that I was considering their proposal, and watched them like a hawk. The way they interacted with each other, the way they talked about the house, the way they looked at me like I was already a ghost. And I listened. I listened to Amanda's subtle hints about renovations they'd want to make, about how the master bedroom would be perfect for the kids, about how they couldn't wait to have a backyard for the dogs. I listened to Derek talk about his plans to expand his real estate business, about how the extra space would help him host clients and close deals. But more than that, I listened to the things they didn't say. The way they glanced at each other when I mentioned retirement. The way Derek's voice would go tight when I talked about staying in the house. The way Amanda would change the subject when I brought up Elizabeth's garden. And I realized that this wasn't just about the house. This was about control. It was about money. It was about the inheritance they'd already started spending in their minds. And somewhere along the way, my son had stopped seeing me as his father and started seeing me as an obstacle. I played along for weeks. I feigned indecision, telling Derek that I was still thinking about his offer. I let him believe that he was wearing me down, that I was too old and too tired to fight back. I even let him bring an appraiser to the house again, pretending to consider the numbers. All the while, I was gathering evidence. I worked with Valerie to compile a comprehensive document showing every single asset I owned, every bit of property, every investment, every trust fund. I made sure everything was in order, airtight, impossible to contest. And I started to notice other things. Little details that painted a much darker picture than I'd ever imagined. Like the fact that Derek had already started making changes to the house without my permission. One afternoon, I came home to find a contractor installing new windows in the living room. Derek had called them himself, using a company I'd never heard of, and told them I'd given approval. When I confronted him about it, he played dumb, claiming he thought we'd already agreed to start renovations. I let it slide, but I made a mental note. Then there was the bank account. I'd always had a joint account with Elizabeth, one we used for household expenses and shared savings. After she died, I started getting monthly statements showing large withdrawals I hadn't authorized. When I called the bank, they told me Derek had been added to the account years ago, back when Elizabeth was still alive. He'd been given full access, and he was using it like his personal checking account. I felt the betrayal like a physical blow. My son had been stealing from me. Not just taking money he thought he was entitled to, but systematically draining the account that was supposed to be our retirement fund. And he'd been doing it for months. When I confronted him about it, he had the audacity to look offended. "Dad, Mom and I talked about this. She wanted me to have access to the account in case something happened to her. I didn't think you'd mind." "Didn't think I'd mind?" I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. "Derek, this is our money. Your mother's and mine. You don't get to just take it without asking." "I'm not taking it," he said, but I could see the guilt flicker across his face. "I'm using it for the renovations. For the house. The house you're supposed to sell to me anyway." "The house I own," I said. "The house I'm not selling." He stared at me like I'd just grown a second head. "What do you mean, you're not selling?" "We agreed. We agreed to nothing." I cut him off. "You've been pushing me, manipulating me, trying to steal from me, and I've been patient. I've been trying to give you the benefit of the doubt because you're my son. But I'm done." "Derek, what is he talking about?" Amanda asked, stepping forward. She'd been hovering in the background, watching the confrontation unfold. "Dad's just upset," Derek said, forcing a smile. "He's still grieving. He doesn't mean what he's saying." "I mean every word," I said. "And I want you both to listen carefully. You will never take this house from me. You will never take my money. You will never take anything that belongs to me." "Dad, stop being dramatic," Derek said, but I could see the panic starting to creep into his eyes. "You need help. You're not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking more clearly than I have in months," I said. "And I have proof. I have documents. I have everything I need to make sure you never touch a single penny of what's mine." Then I walked away, leaving them standing in the kitchen, their carefully constructed plans crumbling around them. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Over the next few weeks, I systematically dismantled everything Derek and Amanda had been building. I started with the bank accounts, removing Derek's access and freezing the joint accounts entirely. When he tried to withdraw money and found his card declined, he called me in a rage. "What the hell did you do?" he screamed into the phone. "I protected what's mine," I said calmly. "You should try it sometime." Then I moved on to the property. I had Valerie draw up formal eviction notices for any contractors Derek had hired, making it clear that they were trespassing on private property and would be prosecuted if they continued their work. One by one, the contractors stopped showing up. The renovations ground to a halt. And through it all, I watched. I watched my son's world collapse around him, and I felt nothing but satisfaction. But the worst was yet to come. Because I'd discovered something even more shocking in the months since Elizabeth died. Something I'd never expected to find. It started with a letter, a handwritten note from Elizabeth that I'd found tucked inside one of her old books, addressed to me. My dearest Robert, it began. If you're reading this, then I'm gone. And I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you the truth while I was alive. I'm sorry for all the secrets I kept. But I need you to know that I loved you. I loved you more than you'll ever understand. I read the letter 3 times, trying to make sense of it. What was she talking about? What secrets? Then I found the second letter, hidden in a safety deposit box at the bank. This one was addressed to Derek, and it was dated just 2 weeks before Elizabeth died. In it, she confessed that Derek wasn't my biological son. I read the words over and over, waiting for the shock to fade, waiting for some kind of emotional response. But nothing came. I just sat there, staring at the page, feeling like the ground had been pulled out from under me. Elizabeth had been pregnant when we met. She'd been involved with another man, a brief affair that had ended badly, and she'd been too afraid to tell me the truth. When we got married, she'd convinced herself that it didn't matter, that Derek was mine in every way that counted. And maybe she was right. Maybe it didn't matter. I'd raised that boy, loved him, sacrificed for him, believed in him. He was my son in every way that counted. But he wasn't my blood. And that changed everything. I thought about all the times Derek had looked at me with cold eyes, treating me like a stranger. I thought about all the times he'd dismissed my opinions, my concerns, my love. And I realized that maybe he'd always known. Maybe he'd always sensed that something was different, that he didn't quite belong. Or maybe he just didn't care. Maybe he was exactly the kind of person Elizabeth had been afraid he'd become. I kept the letters hidden, not sure what to do with them. Part of me wanted to confront Derek, to watch his face when he learned the truth. But another part of me, the part that still remembered the little boy who used to run to me with scraped knees, couldn't bear to hurt him like that. So I kept quiet. For now. But I started digging deeper. I hired a private investigator to look into Derek's business dealings, and what he found was even more disturbing than I'd imagined. Derek's real estate company was struggling. He'd overextended himself, taken on too much debt, and was on the verge of bankruptcy. The house wasn't just a nice opportunity for him. It was a lifeline. He needed the money from the sale to pay off his creditors, to keep his business afloat, to save his own skin. And he'd been willing to destroy his own father to do it. I sat with this information for weeks, trying to decide what to do. I could have taken everything from him. I could have exposed his financial crimes, reported him to the authorities, watched his whole life crumble into dust. But that wouldn't have been justice. That would have been cruelty. And I wasn't a cruel man, no matter what Derek might have believed. So I came up with another plan. A better plan. One that would teach him a lesson he'd never forget, without completely destroying him. I invited Derek and Amanda to the house, telling them I had an important announcement. They arrived looking nervous, unsure of what to expect. I could see the tension in their bodies, the way they held themselves like they were preparing for a fight. "Thank you for coming," I said, gesturing for them to sit down in the living room. I'd set up a small table with documents spread out, and Valerie was there to witness everything. "Dad, what's this about?" Derek asked, his voice guarded. "This is about the future," I said. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about me not being able to handle this house on my own. And you're right. It's too big for one person. I've decided that I'm going to sell it." Derek's face lit up with relief. "Dad, that's great news. I'm so glad you finally see." "To someone else," I finished, cutting him off. "The house is going to a new family. A young couple with 3 kids who've been looking for a place in this neighborhood for years. They're good people, and they'll take care of it the way your mother would have wanted." Derek's expression shifted from relief to anger. "What? No, you can't do that." "We agreed. We agreed to nothing," I said calmly. "And I'm not selling to you, Derek. After everything you've done, I'm not giving you the satisfaction of getting what you want." "This isn't fair," Amanda said, her voice trembling. "We've been counting on this. We've made plans. Plans that involved stealing from me?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Plans that involved manipulating me, lying to me, trying to push me out of my own home? You think I don't know about the money you took from the joint account? You think I don't know about the contractors you hired without my permission?" Derek's face went pale. "Dad, I can explain." "I don't want your explanations," I said. "I want you to understand something. Every single thing you try to take from me, I still own. The house, the money, the inheritance. All of it is mine, and none of it is yours. You burned your bridges, son. You burned them all. What about the trust fund? Derek asked, his voice desperate. Mom said you set up a trust for me. That's mine by right. Your mother was mistaken, I said. I never set up a trust for you. I set up a trust for my son. But you're not my son. You're not my blood. I watched his face crumble as the truth sank in. I watched him realize that everything he'd believed about his life, his future, his inheritance, was all based on a lie. What are you talking about? He whispered. I found your mother's letters, I said. I know the truth. And I know everything you've been hiding from me. The debt, the bankruptcy, the lies. I know it all. Derek looked like he was going to be sick. Please, Dad. Please don't do this. I'll do anything. I'm giving you one chance, I said. One. You leave me alone. You never contact me again unless it's to sincerely apologize. And you start taking responsibility for your own mistakes. If you can do that, I won't expose what you've done. I won't press charges for the fraud and theft. You'll just be free to start over. He stared at me, tears streaming down his face. Why would you do that? After everything I did? Because somewhere, beneath all the greed and selfishness, there's still a part of you that's my son, I said. The little boy who used to run to me with scraped knees. The one who told me he wanted to be just like me. I remember him, and I want to give him a chance. Derek broke down completely. He fell to his knees, begging for forgiveness, promising to change. Amanda stood frozen, her face pale with shock. And I just watched, feeling a strange mix of pity and relief. It was over. Finally, it was over. In the end, Derek and Amanda moved away, far from Austin, far from the house, far from everything they'd tried to destroy. They didn't go to prison, because I chose not to press charges. They didn't get a penny of my money, because I made sure they couldn't. They had to start over from nothing, rebuilding their lives the hard way. And I sold the house to that young couple, just like I said I would. They moved in with their 3 kids, and I could see them making memories in the home where Elizabeth and I had made ours. I moved into a smaller place, a cozy apartment in downtown Austin, close to the restaurants and coffee shops and the lively energy of the city. It was a fresh start, a new chapter. And for the first time in years, I felt at peace. Derek called me a year later, and his voice was different. Softer, sadder. He told me he'd been going to therapy, working on himself, trying to be a better person. He said he understood now that he'd been wrong, that he'd taken me for granted, that he'd let his own ego and ambition blind him to what really mattered. Dad, I'm sorry, he said. I'm so sorry for everything. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of all those years of resentment and betrayal slowly start to lift. I know you are, son. I know. Do you think we can ever get past this? He asked. Do you think we can ever be a family again? I thought about it. I thought about Elizabeth, about the love she'd felt for both of us, about the secrets she'd carried to her grave. I thought about all the years I'd spent raising a child who wasn't mine, all the sacrifices I'd made, all the love I'd given. And I realized that it didn't matter. It didn't matter that we weren't biologically related. It didn't matter that he'd betrayed me. What mattered was that I'd made a choice, a long time ago, to be his father. And that choice was still mine to make. I don't know if we can ever be the same, I said honestly. But I'm willing to try. If you're willing to be honest with me, to rebuild trust, to prove that you've changed. I am, he said, and I could hear the tears in his voice. I promise, Dad. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. We talked for an hour that night, longer than we'd talked in years. It wasn't easy. There were moments of silence, moments of tension, moments where the old resentments came bubbling to the surface. But we pushed through them. We started to heal. And over time, things got better. Derek and Amanda eventually had a child of their own, a little girl they named Elizabeth after the mother who'd loved them both despite everything. They invited me to the baptism, and I went, holding my granddaughter in my arms and feeling a sense of hope I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation. We still had our moments, our disagreements, our misunderstandings, but we were trying. We were making an effort, and sometimes that's all that matters. As for the house, I drove by it sometimes, just to see how the new owners were doing. They'd painted the shutters a cheerful yellow and planted flowers in the garden, just like Elizabeth would have wanted. The kids played on the lawn, laughing and running, filling the old house with new memories. I'd drive away with a smile on my face, thinking about all the years I'd spent in that house, all the joy and sorrow. It had been my home. But now it belonged to someone else, someone who would love it as much as I had. And that was okay, because I learned that a home isn't a place. It's the people you love, the memories you make, the moments that matter. And I had all of them, right here in my home. Elizabeth's letters were the hardest part. I kept them, of course, tucked away in a box with her other belongings. I'd read them sometimes, when I missed her voice, when I needed to feel close to her again. And I'd wonder what she would have thought of everything that happened. Would she have been proud of me for showing mercy? Would she have been angry that I'd kept her secret? Or would she have simply been grateful that I'd found a way to forgive? I don't know the answer to that question. I don't think I ever will. But I do know that she loved me, and I loved her, and that love was real even if everything else was complicated. So I moved forward. I kept living, kept loving, kept finding joy in the small moments. I joined a seniors book club and made new friends. I started volunteering at a local shelter, helping people who were struggling just like I'd struggled. I traveled to places I'd always wanted to see, making memories that were mine alone. And I forgave myself for all the mistakes, all the doubts, all the moments I'd wondered if I'd done enough. I forgave myself for not seeing the betrayal sooner, for not being the father Derek needed, for all the things I couldn't change. Because in the end, forgiveness isn't about the other person. It's about yourself. It's about letting go of the anger and the pain and the resentment so you can move forward. It's about choosing to be happy despite everything. Derek and I are still working on our relationship. It's not perfect, and it might never be. But we're trying. We're showing up for each other, even when it's hard. And that's more than we had before. The last time I saw him, we were at a restaurant, sharing a meal and talking about his daughter. He told me that he'd started teaching her about Elizabeth, telling her stories about the grandmother she'd never meet. He showed me pictures of her first steps, her first words, her first everything. And I looked at my son, this man who'd caused me so much pain, and I saw the little boy I'd raised. I saw the love and the hope and the potential. I saw my family, because that's what matters. Not the house, not the money, not the inheritance, but the people you love and the choice to keep loving them, even when it's hard. The title of this story is At My Wife's Funeral. My son told me to leave the family home. He didn't know I owned everything. And looking back, I think that's the most important lesson of all. We all have secrets. We all have things we're afraid to share. But the truth will always come out in the end, and when it does, it can either destroy you or set you free. I chose freedom. I chose to let go of the anger and the pain and the resentment. I chose to forgive, to move forward, to build something new. And maybe that's the real revenge. Not taking everything from someone, but showing them that they can't take anything from you. Not the house, not your dignity, not your joy. Because all of that comes from inside, from the choice to keep living, even when the world falls apart around you. So if you're watching this, and you're going through something similar, I want you to remember one thing. You are stronger than you think. You are more resilient than you know. And no matter what anyone takes from you, they can never take your spirit. They can try. They can scheme and plan and manipulate. But in the end, the only thing that matters is how you choose to respond. Will you let them destroy you? Or will you stand up, brush yourself off, and start again? I chose to start again, and it was the best decision I ever made. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Family Dark Blames, and share your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next story.